Hey folks, Scott Jeffy here. This is my first coffee break with Scott. And I'm so pleased that my first guest, if you will, is my old friend Jesse Homan, who is now at Education Dynamics. We started working together way back at Converge. Education Dynamics has it's a nice sweet spot because that's of course where Carol Aslanian and I were for more than a decade. Jesse, how you doing? What's new?
Hi, good. How are you doing, Scott?
Good. Well, hey, what I was about to say is what the origins of this conversation are that Jesse's gotten really interested in the revival of undergraduate adult, the research that Carol Aslanian did way back when. He's actually read the 1980 book that if all of you have listened to me, you've probably heard me say, I worked for Carol Aslanian, who literally wrote the book on why adults go back to school. He's taken an interest in that book. He's read it. I haven't read it in 20 years. And we've had some great conversations. And so we're going to get back to that because I want to share with you before we start on the back and forth. I want to just share two data points with you that indicate that the adult undergraduate market is back to being something that is hot. The first point I want to make is the adult undergraduate market has been in decline since 2011. We see on the slide there was a high point there. All those years before 2011, those were the heyday of adult ed. That was when Carol Aslanian and I were doing 300 studies for colleges on what they needed to do to serve that market. But it's been in decline. But subsequent new data, this is IPED's data, but new data from National Student Clearinghouse, which indicates that the undergraduate market, if we're looking at this by age, is on the rise. It's on the rise significantly, and it's on the rise among these audiences that are traditionally the adult market, certainly not the traditional age undergrad. If we look at 21 to 24, it's 3.4% growth in just the last year. In the 25 to 29 at 6.8, and in the 30 plus, it's 10% growth. We're talking about 200,000 additional students just in 1 year in the 30 plus group. Now, that I just wanted to lay the scene there with a little bit of data because I guess I'm the data guy. But I'd like Jesse and I have been talking about this. And so, Jesse, my first question for you is this. What do you think adult undergraduate enrollment, I'm sorry, why do you think adult undergraduate enrollment was in decline for so long?
So, yeah, so I'm really happy to be here. I'm glad that you used that data to kind of frame what we're looking at today, because if you look at the graph and where the peak is and where it starts declining, right? It starts declining in 2011. There's a peak before that. That's a normal economic situation that had been the trend in the decades prior, which is that when the economy is doing poorly, education does well. And so we had a massive financial crisis in 2007, 2008. And so people went back to school. There was no, like, people were losing their jobs left and right. They had to do something. So they went back to school, and not just graduate school, but finishing their undergraduate bachelor degrees, right? Like, these were adults who had not completed their degree and needed to. Once the economy started turning around, adult education started declining because the job market was thriving and getting better. So the thing that is interesting about that data is that we did not see a similar trend during the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, we actually saw what people were calling a double negative in the economy. The economy went down, and then also education also went down. So over the first few years of the pandemic, people were not going back to school. And part of that was because even though the overall economy might not have been in, or might have been in turmoil, people actually jobs were in high demand. It was really easy to get a job. In fact, we were seeing record numbers of people leaving jobs and going elsewhere, calling it the Great Resignation, right? There was a lot of economic factors that meant that even though the overall economy was doing poorly, people didn't feel the need to go back to school. And so the question really is, why do you think that it is bouncing back now? Like, why, starting in 2023, are we seeing more and more adults 25 or older enter into finishing from the generally some college no credit, no credential crowd? Why are they getting their degrees now?
Yeah, you're channeling Carol in some of that phraseology. I love it. Before I answer the rebound, I want to make one more point. One of the things that we noticed back in that era was once the Great Recession hit, never did we not see the cost of studies being the most important factor in enrollment decisions. The reason that was stunning was prior to the Great Recession, we had never seen the cost of tuition and fees in the top five. And so
Wow.
the Great Recession did kind of completely reset, I think, the Americans' mind. And one of the additional reasons that I think we started to see the decline after 2011 was when you think about the socioeconomic status of an individual that, this is the some college no degree market.
Right.
They were probably even then carrying some debt, and they don't have a degree, so their earning power was probably not as much. I worry that institutions have been pricing themselves out of being able to serve this market that has some real financial challenges. Now let's talk about the rebounding, and then I want to get some more comment. Why do I
Yeah.
think it's rebounding? I think that some of the same people that have been answering surveys over the last couple of years saying they're questioning the value of a college degree, the power of a college degree, are learning. Now, let me paraphrase or echo Carol. They're learning sooner rather than later that a college degree really does. Why do I say that? I don't know. I've been doing employer studies throughout all these years, and while CEOs they've been talking about skills rather than degrees
Yes.
and everything for years and years. HR leaders who make the decisions, who have always been the focus of our employer surveys, have continued to rely on degrees as the top way to screen candidates, with certain exceptions. But honestly, it really is an important factor. I got another one for you though. Um, how do you think, and maybe we're seeping right into this, but how do you think that the latest generation of adult undergrads is the same as previous generations since you've been reading Carol's work more recently than
So
I have? So go
yes.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I think is so great about the first book about adult learning called Adults in Transition, Americans in Transition, and then Adult Students Today in the follow-up in 2001 is that there is such clarity in what causes adults to realize they need to go back to school. Carol and you talk a lot about transitions and triggers, right? Like, what are transition points in people's lives? What are triggers with which that kind of cause a latent need for education to fire off? And when we're talking about adult education, we're also not just talking about getting credentialed. We're talking about any other ways in which adults realize they need to improve skills, to learn how to do something just find a way to do that, whether it is getting a certificate or a degree or just taking a course, right? Like there are different ways in which adults kind of figure out that they need to change. And those transition points and those triggers happen and kind of become a catalyst to make them move forward with a big decision, right? Like you just said, the cost of getting a degree has never seems so out of reach, I think, for a lot of people. And so to make that sort of financial commitment takes a big thing. What I would say, and so how are they the same? Those triggers and transitions are mostly look the same. How I think that they are different is that even in those early works, there was a projection forward of these triggers will happen more often. This turbulence it will become greater, and so that people will be changing jobs faster. They'll be needing to learn skills faster. Things will be changing at a more rapid pace, and it couldn't be more true. Like that is how we are different now, is that I'm certain that the triggers which cause adults to realize that they need a degree, certificate, some sort of new information, some sort of learning a new skill, they're coming at a more rapid pace. We've been in an AI revolution for 18 months now. Before that, it was blockchain and cryptocurrency, right? Like these are things that cause huge impacts in the job market. And we've almost all forgotten about blockchain, but it's still having actual effects, right? Like even though it's not a fad like large language models are. So these things are going to compile. There will be something else post AI and LLMs that are going to change the way people work. People need to know things about. So like this stuff is happening at a quicker pace.
Absolutely. And you've summarized it, I think, so well. Two points to close. One, those transitions and triggers, the trigger was something that happened in their life. Um, to do it, the trigger means why did I do it then? The
Right.
transition is related, but it's broader. All those trigger events were I'm sorry, almost always they needed to do something with their career. They needed to make more money. So they needed an advancement, they needed more study and so on. That hasn't changed. That hasn't changed. In addition to the things that you said have changed, the only thing that I would add is they're we've always thought that they were highly demanding. And they always have been highly demanding. They have high expectations of the institutions for a different type of service than their 18-year-old counterparts. And if you don't deliver, they're not, it used to be if you don't deliver, they're not happy, but they're probably going to enroll anyway because you're the only game in town.
Right.
Today, they are just as demanding in new ways, more technologically savvy. They want personalization. They want customization. They want a different level, but still of high touch. And although this is not them really so much, they have so much more choice.
Yes.
They have so much more choice that institutions that don't meet those, whereas Carol and I used to be able to say, look, you should do this if you want to grow. Today, we would need to say, and I am saying, you must do this if you want to grow this population, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. Yeah, there's at education dynamics now, we're trying to shift away from talking about adult learning and call it the modern learner, just because of how we are seeing, you say the adult learners, like they're thinking in certain ways and they want certain things. We're seeing younger learners, things people we would normally call traditional learners, have start to meet those, right? Like start to meet those values so that the definition between an adult learner and a traditional learner is not just blurry, but kind of effervescent or just or gone at this point. Age just really isn't a determining factor about how people learn, when they learn, and why they learn. So if you are trying to target a population right now, adult learners or the modern learner is who you need to go after because what they want is becoming the same thing as what a traditional student wants. And part of that is financial, right? Like people are questioning the value of a degree and as they question it, the schools need to come with what value that they bring, what the value of a degree is, and why they're the provider that makes sense for the student. Because as you say, they have so much choice at this point, and they're making decisions so quickly that you only have a small window to provide that high touch, high service, knowing that you are providing something that is of value to the student before they pull the trigger on somebody else.
I'm so glad to hear that education dynamics has moved to this modern learner. You're honoring Carol there also. Carol and I bickered back and forth for 20 years about whether, whether we ought to continue to call them adult students. Carol was saying there's no difference. As a matter of fact, I think you pointed out to me that Carol and I closed the book in 2001 by saying the adult learner is converging with the traditional and the adult learner are converging. And we tried a lot of things. We tried post-traditional students. We tried all kinds of things. But I love the conception of the modern learner, and I applaud Education Dynamics for doing that. By the way, folks, you should go download Education Dynamics' report, the Modern Learner Report. What's it called, Jesse?
Yes, the Modern Learner Report, the 2025 Modern Learner Report used to be the online college student report, but we renamed it this year because of the shift in demographics that we're seeing.
And folks, it does still have a little bit of my fingerprints all over it, but I love that. I feel like I kind of was part of the birthing party there.
Absolutely,
Anyway,
yeah.
so Jesse, thanks for doing this. This is fantastic. Folks, I'm going to do this every once in a while because one of the things I decided to do was not every guy or gal, what am I, 80 years old guy and gal? Not every person that has a lot of knowledge to impart with folks has gray hair. And it's occurred to me when my conversation with Jesse, I've got another one coming up with one of my favorite people to talk about recruitment issues. And so it's all coming your way, and I thank you for listening to this. Jesse, thanks for joining me today. Let's carry the
Thanks for having me.
conversation on.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Take care.